Good to go. Cool.
Luke says.
Okay. It is 6 p.m. on March 14th, and this is the time and place of the Ada County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone attending and anyone online if they're watching. Just as a friendly reminder, we are a group of volunteers appointed by the elected Board of County Commissioners. Please silence your cell phones, and I'll also give a quick overview of how the items are heard and how tonight will kind of flow. Once we get to each item, staff will present the application. Then the applicant will come forward and have an opportunity to present their application as well. Then members of the public will have 3 minutes each to comment if they so choose. Staff will come back up for round 2 to answer any questions from the commission on the technical side. And then the applicant will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal or to answer any additional questions that arose from the commission members. Then the public hearing will close. I'll look for a motion from my fellow commissioners, and then discussion will follow, finishing at a vote, and then we'll move on to the next item. There is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room. If you didn't sign in but want to testify, just raise your hand when we ask. So we will start with roll call. Commissioner Blitman,
Present.
Commissioner Birch,
Present.
Commissioner Retzloff.
Present.
I am Chairperson Exton, and I'm here. Commissioner Wickstrom,
Here.
Commissioner Scott,
Here.
and Commissioner Colson is absent. And just to open off, I know we have a very short agenda today. Was there any reordering that anyone wants to do? Okay, cool. So starting with unfinished business, application 2023-0106 ZCDAS-VAC-PR, Gary McAllister. It looks like we have a staff recommendation to table to the April 10th, 2024 meeting. So I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Blitman,
I move that we table project number 2023-01060 to the April 10th, 2024 meeting.
Chairman, Commissioners, I apologize. April 11th is actually
I
the
was gonna ask,
tabling
okay.
date that we need on that one, so.
Table that till April 11th, 2024.
all right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion that we want to? Okay, cool. So call for the vote. All those in favor of tabling to the April 11th, 2024 meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And I will also vote for aye, so it passes unanimously. Moving to the first item of new business, application 2023-00981 CUMSP Valerie Tim, and Mr. Letson will give his presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. The item before you is a conditional use and master site plan for a club, lodge, or social hall for events associated with the Lavender Farm. The applicant is Valerie Tim. The proposed location is a 40-acre property within the Rural Preservation District located at 16842 South Vista Avenue, just south of the Cunamore Road area. Uses in the surrounding area include rural residences on large lots or just large lot rangeland. Pictured here is a detailed site plan of the applicant's proposal. You can see lavender fields highlighted here, close to Vista Avenue. Proposed parking area, an existing structure where I think they plan to, which they plan to utilize for some of the events. They are proposing hours of operation 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Wednesday through Sundays, 8 to 10 for limited events. They didn't specify how many limited events. They expect about 20 visitors per event. Larger events, they would like to have more than 20. So again, they didn't request a specific cap on anything. Just wanted to give you a sense of what their operation was going to look like. They'd also have 3 employees per each event. They have requested a waiver of perimeter landscaping, and staff is in support of that, given it's a lavender farm, limited water availability in the area to actually maintain landscaping plus the size of the property. And they have requested for the parking plan to give us more detail on the exact location, overflow parking areas, and ADA accessible parking spaces. They are proposing 12 parking spaces, and in their detailed letter, they did ask for 2 of those to be ADA accessible, but in talking with staff, it sounds like 1 would be their preferred, which actually meets our code. So if the commission entertains that, we would have them we'd have you modify that condition to have just 1 ADA accessible space. In terms of comments, we received one comment of support from the public, and all reviewing agencies and departments approved the project without any fanfare and provided standard conditions of approval. So in conclusion, staff is recommending approval, and I'll stand for any questions.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions?
It will probably come up in the applicants, but what about sanitary facilities like bathrooms and
Yep.
and that existing building? What kinds of risks are there with people being inside of that existing building?
Chairman, Commissioners, regarding the sanitary, wastewater, Central District Health will approve portable toilets for this use, which is acceptable given, again, it's on septic and we don't really have a lot of alternatives other than upsizing their septic. For the use of that structure, I'll allow the applicant to describe how they plan to do that. There is always the requirement that if any structure is to be used for a non-residential purpose, it'd have to come through our building department to have our building official look at it and request any necessary upgrades. But again, before we get the cart too far in front of the horse, I'll let the applicant describe their use
Thank
for
you.
you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? All right, seeing none, is the applicant Valerie Tim present? Also, if you can come forward, state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 15 minutes to talk about your project.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Valerie Tim. I live at 16842 South Vista Avenue in Cuna. I'm here with my husband, Alex.
I'm pulling up a presentation for the applicant.
Perfect, thank you. While he's pulling that up, so we moved to this property in 2021. We moved from Boise, and we're first-generation farmers. We both work full-time, so this is had been kind of our side hustle, hobby, weekend warrior type project. We have been working to build the farm for the last 3 years, and our primary crop is lavender. It does really well in this environment because it doesn't require a lot of water, which is great because we don't have a lot of access to water. And it does really well in the heat and the wind that we're experiencing now. And we've had a really positive response from our friends, our neighbors, our community members as we've started to grow the lavender farm. We also have chickens, beef, and pork that we produce there. And the number one question I get is, can I come to the farm? Can I bring my kids? Can I see this and experience it? And so that's really what our aim is to do, is to be a place that the community can come to and experience local agriculture, connect with other people, and really be a serene and tranquil place for families and friends to gather and give them that experience. Okay, next slide. So just kind of an overview of our property. In addition to what Leon has provided, we have a 40-acre parcel. We're in the Rural Preservation District. The front acre of our property is lavender, so my husband and I hand-planted 2,500 of these plants, and this is the first year that they will grow into maturity so that we can start to invite the community out to help us pick it, because it's quite a bit for just us to do that. So that is part of our plan. Another 30 acres we have for grazing our livestock, and then we've got another 9 that we're using for other things or not using much of at all. Let me see what else. Yeah, okay, I think I can go to the next one. So we're specifically applying for the conditional use application to be a club, lodge, or social hall to be able to invite the community out. I have a couple pictures of the lavender in bloom from last year, so you can kind of get a sense of how many plants that looks like. That field there is about the size of a football field, and then we have another field on the other side of our driveway. We're proposing to be open Wednesday through Sunday during the week, generally between 9 and 6. We will all be outdoors. The existing structure that's there is kind of like, we call it a barn, but it has 3 sides, and it's mostly for parking our tractor, our trucks, and our feed storage, so that would not be a place that we would invite the public into. Even though it is there on the farm, that would not be in their area that they'd be going to. We have event-driven hours. We'd like the opportunity to be able to extend that 9 to 6 from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on occasion. A lot of that is driven by weather. July is very hot. We have no shade. So we might want to do a morning U-Pick or a morning yoga class or have a sunset U-Pick or a picnic type dinner in the evening hours, since it does stay light out until around that 9 to 10 time frame. For the U-Picks, we're expecting about an average of 20 visitors a day, that Wednesday through Sunday. For events, we might expect a little bit more if we had a class or a private gathering or something like that. And then it'll mostly just be my husband and I working the farm. And some friends or family members, if we can rope in a third employee, that'd be great down the way. All right, next slide. So just some more visuals for you to kind of get a feel for what it's like out on our farm. These are pictures from last year of kids' friends that came to kind of see the animals or pick lavender. They all really like to do that. I had a yoga class with some of my friends and invited them to help us harvest afterwards. And so those are really the types of events and the type of environment we want to create for the community to come and enjoy and learn more about lavender agricultural production and just get to experience the farm there. Next slide. I also wanted to address parking a little bit because this came up in the staff report, and just set aside any concerns about the amount of space we have for parking. The red box is the gravel parking area that we're recommending to have the minimum of the 12 spots that we've identified. That's about a half an acre in that red box, so we could fit about 40 vehicles there if we needed to. And then all of those green areas just indicate where we have the capacity for overflow parking. That's not something that we're planning to need, but it is there, and so it wouldn't impact Vista Avenue or our neighbors to have people parking in front of someone else's home. We have plenty of parking there. That all of those boxes together is about 1.2 acres and could fit around 200 cars if we needed to. And then in addition to that, to the right of this picture and kind of to the east of our property, we have another 30 acres and a gravel road that extends kind of about a half mile from start to finish that you have a turnaround for, and we could even go into that if we ever needed to. That's not what we're planning to do, but the capacity that we have. And then I put some information in there on the size of the proposed stalls. That came from the code and what I think we needed to do in terms of sizes. So that's what we were looking at for that. We have existing gravel that I think meets the type 1 and type 2 requirement for what we would need per the specifications. I did kind of have a question or wanted to have some dialogue around the concept of having concrete or asphalt for the ADA parking spots, just because within our farm setting, kind of similar to the landscaping waiver, that would be the only place where a patron would encounter the gravel or the asphalt. And so if it's possible, we'd like to request an exception or an exemption to that to continue to use the gravel that we have. But we are also open to other ideas. We do have a concrete skirt around the house that would provide concrete that's existing, and it's about 100 feet from the lavender farm, or the lavender field itself. So that could also be an option to meet the intent behind that. We're not opposed to having ADA spots, we have as many as we need, but just want to make sure that it makes sense in our environment. And then the next page, I have just some more pictures, if you're curious, of what our current parking area looks like, and that gives it a couple of different vantage points as well as the gravel material that we have there, if you'd like to see that. So that picture on the far right kind of shows their driveway entrance, and then it curves to the right for the actual parking. So you can see what it looks like from the view of the field and then looking at the field. And that is really all I have. I did include some maps on the next slide if we need to talk through them. I was just looking at the different applications that are out there kind of in our application area of agritourism and event centers and wineries. There really aren't a lot of agritourism or social halls in the Rural Preservation District that I've seen that are approved. This is the southern part of Ada County, and we're not even on the map. We're in the little corner there after Cunamora and Pleasant Valley, so we're pretty far out from any other neighborhoods or businesses that exist in our area. All of our neighbors have been really supportive. They couldn't come tonight, I don't think, but I got a lot of supportive text messages asking how they could help us, and I think we had a letter. So that is all I had. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, Commissioner Blitman?
Can you tell me about your neighborhood meeting and how many people came and what kinds of questions they had?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really excited for the neighborhood meeting. I had chairs set out, lavender. It was like during our harvest season, so they could really get a sense of it. And we didn't have anyone attend. So excited to see them. But I have talked to them individually. I sent out a group text when the day we put the sign up and just said, hey, I want to let you guys know that we're doing this, try to be really transparent. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. And all I got was, where do I send a letter to write? So I had 3 people ask me that. I think only one made it to actually do that, but I really appreciated their support. So it's a really great community. Everybody is kind of homesteading out there or has other farm businesses. There's a horse facility, there's a bison ranch, all very kind of like-minded in wanting to keep with the farm atmosphere and that rural lifestyle. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman? So, thank you. You had mentioned that there's, you're expecting about 20 people a day when you're open. But you're talking about all the parking that you have out there. What would you expect one of the largest events to be for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It's something I've kind of struggled with because this will be we haven't had a lot of events yet, so I don't know what the community response is going to be. And we want to keep it to a manageable number for what we can make sure that everybody's having a good experience throughout the day. So I would say if we were on the high end and we were having like a private event or maybe like a harvest festival or something like that, I would expect maybe at the max 100, 150, somewhere in that range, which we could accommodate with our parking. I wanted to show the parking just to kind of give you a sense of how much space we have. There's a lot of flower farms I know that are in more of a rural residential district where they're really more in a neighborhood in the 5-acre lots. And part of their challenges is parking. And that's not a challenge that we have where we are.
Okay. Would you be open to having a limitation put on the number of people? Just if it does get big, it does become more of a problem for the neighbors and the noise and everything, the traffic that is out there, because there's not much traffic out there. I imagine right now it's great that where you're located, but
So we're on a dead-end street, so it's not a through street where there is a ton of traffic. A lot of traffic does go down to the bison ranch or the horse facility. I'd like to kind of approach it with, if our neighbors have concerns, that we discuss putting like a limit on the number of attendees. And I go that direction really because it's difficult to be a financially viable business when you're in farming. And so the events for us, I think, are really what's going to make our farm successful. And as we're getting started, I'd really like to kind of maintain that opportunity to be flexible in what is going to work and what our community is asking for. And I don't expect it to be something that will be burdensome for our neighbors. They haven't expressed any of those types of concerns.
one follow-up, Mr. Chairman. And then just essentially, you're saying your hours, would you have 8 to 6 with the option of going 9 to 6, I believe it was?
Yep.
But then with the option, so essentially, if we approve it, essentially you've got 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. There wouldn't be any restrictions on your time besides that. So that works for you. I mean, that's what you really would like to have, is an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. essentially.
Yeah, I don't think we would set our hours to be open all hours of those days, Wednesday through Sunday, but again, kind of weather related. In the summer, having a U-pick around noon, it's just really hot out there and it's not fun, or on a really windy day. So that's kind of where we are looking at the flexibility of having something earlier, having something later that's more event driven. I don't even necessarily know that we'll be open 9 to 6 every day, us standing out there waiting for people to come. We're toying with more of an idea of having a sign up, and that way we know how many people are coming. We can make sure that we have enough staff to make sure that they have a good experience and we're not just standing out there 9 to 6 from Wednesday to Sunday hoping that someone will come too. So it's really more of a learning process for us since we haven't been open to the public yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I just have a question. Thank you very much. Can you clarify what you're asking for the ADA difference? Because I heard one stall and I heard two stalls and I heard maybe gravel and maybe concrete. So just
Yeah.
clarify what you've agreed to in the, or what the findings are, and then what you'd like us to make different than the findings.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we put in our application that we would have 2 ADA parking stalls. I think we're required to have just 1 stall. So we're happy to do 2. We are proposing the gravel lot for all of those parking spaces, if that is allowable. If we have to have concrete or asphalt, we have an existing concrete there on our property, so we'd like to just use the existing material where it is allowable to do so for our application. So that's what we would be requesting, I guess. I don't know if the right
I think
word
it's
is
a change to the
amendment.
condition. I'm happy to talk through
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
the applicant's request if you'd like more information.
yeah, that's fine. I mean,
So Chairman, Commissioners, unfortunately, we have to require an ADA, not unfortunately, but we are required to have an ADA parking space associated with the use based on just what the building code requires and general accessibility rules for non-residential uses. Gravel doesn't work. We haven't permitted gravel as an option. I do think their proposal for the apron around the house and identifying a space dedicated there would work. We've seen other businesses like this do that. I think Red Chair Lavender has something similar where I think it's the parking pad in front of their barn or shop. They've actually made that their ADA accessible space. So if they would want to do something here, and again, only 1 is required, so I think they put 2 in, but based on the number of requested parking spaces at 12, only 1 is required. Overflow is going to be a as needed sort of thing, and so we don't typically base the number of ADA accessible spaces off of overflow parking, so.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
I have another question,
all
I'm
good.
sorry.
Okay.
So talk to me about food trucks and other people that will be coming in to provide services during these events.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question, would we like to have food trucks there? Yeah, I think that is something that we're open to being able to offer. There are no places to get food or drinks anywhere near us. Uber does not deliver. So that would be a great thing to be able to offer if we were having more of like a harvest festival day and had vendors with, pizza or donuts or lemonade or something more refreshing for our patrons to have. And again, that's kind of another thing with that overflow. So that top lot there would be a perfect spot to do that, where we have, again, about a half an acre to host those and plenty of space and far enough away from our neighbors they wouldn't be hearing the generator noise from that and anything like that. So
And we also, one more follow-up question. We also have lots of people that ask about alcohol. And so if you're going to allow beer, wine, and hard alcohol, is that the intention?
yeah, I think that is a separate application process that we have to go through with Central Health District and get approval from our neighbors to do that as well. So didn't address that in this application, but that is something we would look to be able to do.
I can clarify that if you'd like, Commissioners. So as an event center, they would be eligible to get catering permits, which are issued through the clerk's office. And there's a whole separate process for them to be able to get that type of license. It's currently 75% approval of neighbors, I believe within a 300-foot area. I always get the number a little bit wrong. But it is a separate process by our clerk. But as an event center, they would be eligible for something like that if they wanted to pursue it.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? I just have one comment. Really appreciated how robust and thorough your presentation was, so
Thank you very much.
good job.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And with the public testimony, I don't have anyone signed up. Is there anyone in the room that would like to have 3 minutes to talk about the project? And it does not appear that we have anyone online as well, correct?
Nobody's online. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, going back to Mr. Letson for any questions to staff? Are there any questions to staff?
one, Mr. Chairman. Oh,
Commissioner Wickstrom?
No, go ahead.
just, so for an ADA parking, they'll have just the pad, and then once they're off the pad, they're on their own, whatever the material is. It just has to be a
Yeah, Chairman Commissioners, normally if there was a structure involved, there is other ADA rules that require a path, but because there are no structures here, it's really getting, creating that space so that they have enough room to park, load and unload, so there's, the 9-foot wide space plus typically another 9-foot area for clearance that has to be provided to allow someone in and out of the vehicle. But yeah, beyond that, it is a gravel surfaced area. We're not asking them to pave all of this. That just isn't realistic. If there was a structure involved, though, there would be a requirement for like a clear path and that the ADA space be located as close to the structure entrance as possible. Those are other standards.
So if they were to have that 1,600 square foot outbuilding, would at some point they would need a path from the ADA parking to that structure?
Well, so the large outbuilding, are you talking about the current one that's out there or a future?
The future one, I'm thinking, yeah, the future.
Yeah, so if there's a future building associated with the use, the building code will trigger the need to provide that ADA space next to that building. So
Thank you very much.
I have a question. So as it reads the conditions, there's nothing that needs to change if they're willing to just use the pad that's already existing. Do we don't have to put any additional conditions in?
I think the only condition would be, I can't recall if there's a requirement for 2 ADA spaces listed in the conditions of approval. If there was, you could change that to 1. That would be the only modification. Everything else is going to be reviewed by staff as a part of the deferred parking plan. So,
I mean, if they're willing to put in 2, I don't think, I just am wondering if when we do the recommendation, we need to actually physically note a change in the conditions, because, I mean, I think the pad fits the bill, frankly, so I just.
yeah, I mean, I think if they, well, 1 or 2. So there's, just the amount of space they have to dedicate. So if they did a second one, there is an additional 9 by 23 foot area that they'd have to dedicate. I can pull up the conditions and make sure we don't have anything to modify there.
You do have, I'll interject. Page 4, there's a condition, like, it's under Ada County Code 2.4 that says it needs 12 total parking spots, of which 2 must be ADA accessible.
Yeah, and I think that was Corey taking information from the detailed letter and pulling it into that finding. We would we can, at your request, modify that finding to have just 1
Yeah.
It is
ADA
also,
accessible space.
Condition number 3 of that actual conditions of approval, it does say 2 ADA spaces, so we would have to modify or table to modify the
You would
conditions
include that in
if
your
we
motion
choose.
if
don't have
that's
to
what the
table.
board.
We can modify it in the motion, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
and that's a simple enough one that we don't need to bring revised findings back to you. We would
Okay,
just
perfect.
make that change.
Are there any other questions for staff at this time?
I've got a question. What's the renewal cycle? Like, once this is approved, it can go on forever, or, and then what if the neighbors complain?
Well, if the neighbors complain enough, it becomes a code enforcement situation.
Okay,
And if it reaches the level of the board needing to consider revoking the conditional use permit, then that's a whole nother hearing process. So
okay.
we rarely get there. I think what the applicants asked for, it sounds like they want to be a good neighbor, but if you feel like you need to put sideboards on this, then I think you have a couple options. I'm not going to direct your motion here. You could come up with some numbers. That's a little bit of a shot in the dark, honestly, particularly since they don't really know what the demand's going to be. Or, as little of a fan as I am of this, you could have them come back in a year or 2 after they've tested the concept to say, hey, do we need to add conditions to this if, like, all of a sudden, it's like Coachella out here and 5,000 people are hanging out on their 40-acre property. Maybe it's time to consider max attendance or something like that. So if, in working with the applicant's request to kind of test and see how it goes, perhaps a review period in a year or 2 to bring them back and say, hey, what's your average attendance been? Do we need to cap any of this? Do we need to increase the amount of parking, limit hours? You could add a condition like that, so.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, the applicant now has some time to rebuttal the public testimony, which was none, or answer any questions or make any last comments if you would like.
I'll just make one. We don't plan to be Coachella. And I was trying, even just kind of in comparison, I think Low Family Farmstead is kind of the closest to us in terms of agritourism. They have 200 employees. I couldn't figure out how many parking spaces or people come, but that is like such a bigger scale than what we are. So just kind of, again, for comparison, we're not planning to be very large and all of that. So appreciate your time tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I will close the public hearing and look for a motion from my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Scott?
Based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law herein, I recommend the commission approves project number 2023-00981CU-MSP, subject to the conditions of approval as attached in Exhibit A with the modification for the one ADA on that concrete plat or concrete block. We're missing the word there.
Slab.
Slab, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion that we would like to have?
No, I think this is great. It's having the agriculture out there with regard to especially lavender because it's a pollinator, which I have a special place in my heart. I have a lot of those on my plot of land. And I just think this is, I truly don't believe this is going to turn into Lowe's and things like that, which Lowe's is great and nothing against it. I get to go there every year. But I just don't see that being a thing. I mean, I think it's at most, you'll have those seasonal events that may surge them to, I don't know, 50, 100 people at most. But you look at it, it's perfectly adequate. You look just to the south of where they're at, that's a pretty big horse stable arena they got going on down there. So I think this fits just fine. I think they did all their due diligence and they absolutely reached out to the neighbors. And we got no negative comments and we got, they absolutely, they sent in one positive. So I think this is just fine.
Any other comments?
Yeah, all I would say is I agree with that. I mean, if we would have had a host of angry neighbors show up, then the analysis might have been a little bit different if they had legitimate reasons. That's not the case. Had one, and they recommended approval. So it sounds like a great project.
Thank you.
I
Commissioner Blutman?
I would comment that I really like the project and I like pollinators and I like lavender and I think it's awesome. We've heard from some of the neighbors in that area, so I think if they were against it, they would be here. I totally believe that. I believe you might be wildly successful. I've been to another lavender farm that's on Strobel that has a couple hundred people show up. So without a lot of advertising. So I do think that there is the potential for there to be events that have a couple hundred people during the season. But most of the time, those happen and then people go on and they're okay with the one-time event. So I just think that there is a possibility that it's going to be a lot bigger, depending on what you do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Did you have
Yeah,
one?
to agree with Commissioner Blitman, I think your neighbors are trusting you right now. And as I'm looking through that, well, maybe we should put a restriction on the number of people and maybe have a few large events each year. But I'm going to go with your neighbors' trust for you that you'll control the size, or that if it does get big, they'll be able to talk to you about it. You seem to have a good relationship with them. And so I'm going to just cross my fingers and say, oh, here we go, folks. Thank you.
And I'll just add in, I also agree with what Commissioner Blutman and Scott said. I think this is a great fit for the area. And I can see this being very successful and, based off what you've said, neighbors are all supportive. I feel like that rarely happens with a club, lodge, or social hall in my experience on this P&Z commission. So all those in favor for the motion to approve with the adjustment of the one ADA spot or one ADA slab, say aye.
Aye.
And I'll also vote aye. All opposed say no or nay. All right, so it passes. Thank you for your time. Moving on for the last item on our agenda, project 2023022632 ZCDA OTD Pierce Properties, and Ms. Haynes will present first.
Chairman and Commissioners, project number 2023-2632-ZC-DA-OTD is a zoning ordinance map amendment and development agreement application to rezone a property from the Rural Preservation District to the Rural Residential District, as well as a one-time division to split the property into 2 parcels. The property is located at 5322 West Cunamore Road and contains approximately 20 acres in the Rural Preservation District. The property is located west of Cuna city limits and is within Cuna's area of city impact. Most of the surrounding property is rural and rural residential uses, with some industrial zoning within Cuna city limits. The applicant has applied for a rezone from the RP district to the RR district, going from a minimum of 40 acres per lot to 10 acres per lot. The property is currently 20 acres in size, which is non-conforming to the RP district. The property is currently legal and buildable due to being created prior to January 1st, 1985, and also met the minimum acreage at the time it was created. However, though it is a legal property, it cannot be further split unless it is rezoned to a denser district. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property to the RR district and to split the property into 2 10-acre lots. Staff finds that the proposal to rezone and split the property is appropriate and will decrease the nonconformity of the property. Additionally, there is no new construction proposed, as the applicant is wanting to keep the old house instead of demolishing after the new house has finished construction. The application was transmitted to agencies concerned with the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare. There were no comments in opposition from agencies, though any unpermitted structures over 200 square feet will need to be permitted. The county surveyor also only had minor suggestions of corrections. Staff finds that the application complies with Ada County Code and recommends approval to the commission, and this presentation will be known as Exhibit Number 30, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Oh, Commissioner Bowen.
I wondered if you have an overview that shows us what the zoning map is around this property?
I don't have one on me at the moment, but the majority of the surrounding property is all RP, so rural preservation.
And
I
so,
think only in city limits where it's gray here is city zoning, so different.
and the zoning that it's going to is
Rural residential.
rural residential.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, I will invite the applicant forward. Is the applicant in the room? Awesome. If you can come forward, say your name and address for the record, and you'll have 15 minutes to talk about your project.
I'm Austin Pierce. I'm representing Jim Hopkins for the address at 5322 West Cunamore Road. Let's see, can you go to that one slide that, you had it up there that shows the two is what I wanted, or did I not say anything else? I thought I'm good, right? Yeah, that right there. Okay, so the home on the right side of the parcel is his new home. I own Red Leaf Building Company. I built it for him a couple years ago. The home on the left, bottom left, that is the farmhouse that's been there. When we did this project, when we built the house, it was lower than 40 acres at the time, and we didn't know we were gonna have to tear down the other home. So now when I went to go get the C of O on the current house is when they reached out to me that I own Red Leaf Building Company. They were like, hey, we'll give you the C of O, but it's conditional because we want you to tear down the existing farmhouse. And then, of course, we were like, well, it's a perfectly good house. It's like 16, I think it's like 1,500 square feet, I think. And so that's where we are today. The parcel on the right is 10 acres. And then I believe there's a couple other small 5 or 10 acre parcels to the east. So that's the reason for us splitting it. There is already currently 2 septic on the parcels. So each parcel will have, it's already got its own septic systems. Each parcel already has their own wells. So it's already ultimately divided already. We just need to legally do it so we don't have to tear down a perfectly good home. So
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant?
You can probably answer it, or the staff can answer it. Where's the city limits at? If we go back to that
To the
zoning
west,
map, is it just that gray
quarter
area?
mile,
where-
yeah.
Yes.
Gray's Cuna.
Yeah, that one property, 3 parcels to the left, and that's actually the shooting range for the police department.
Okay.
So right past that is the city.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you for your time. Quick and easy.
Yeah, it's quick and easy, thank you.
And it looks like Mr. Miller is here to testify. Is that correct? You can come forward, say your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to testify.
My name is Elver Miller, and I live at 16900 South Curtis, just about 3/4 mile to the south of that. And when that project came before to see if they could build a house, they agreed to tearing down that house. It's a 40-acre ruling out there to build a residence. And there are families out there that there's even 2 people in the family working because they do not want to live in a residential area. And if you guys were to pass it, I think it should be legitimate. The people should be able to come in here and sue the county, because there's been people in the past who have requested to build on 20 acres and were denied because it was 40 acres. Now, people move in from out of state and they decide that they do what they want to do here. They bought it, they built the house, they agreed to tear it down, and it's 20 acres. And it was, if you were going to have 40 acres, then you could break off 2.5, 5 acres and build something else, but not a 20-acre parcel.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
so, but, and I do happen to live on a 20-acre parcel, but that place I live in has been established since 1925, and it was grandfather claused in. There are some out there that are 20, and of course, they're grandfathered. But otherwise, I know of people in the past that had 20 acres out there and could not build. So it's not fair to them or right to them. And now to allow this person to come in here, build a new home, agreed to tear down the old house, but now they want to sit and split it so that they can have 2 on there. And those driveways are connected on that piece of property. They had no intentions whatsoever in ever tearing it down. And I'm just tired of it. For over 120 years, my ancestors and I, we have put up with the laws and the rules made in Idaho. And that's what the people need. If you move in here, that's what you need to abide by and follow.
Thank you for your testimony. And is there anyone else in the room that would like to have 3 minutes and testify besides the applicant? Seeing none. Moving back to Ms. Haynes for any comments from the commissioners, or questions, I mean. Are there any questions? Commissioner Blitman?
I wondered if there was anything in the record that talks about the applicant agreeing to tear down the old house as part of the building package for the new house.
So generally, when a new house is being constructed, it is implied that in order to get the certificate of occupancy, the old house needs to be removed, unless usually otherwise permitted as a secondary dwelling. There isn't anything specific most of the time in actually splitting a property that way. So basically, it's just implied that it needs to be removed or otherwise permitted.
Thank you. Do you have
Follow-up
Yeah.
question. What is the current, proposed accessory dwelling unit that, is moving its way through the, how big an accessory dwelling unit could be?
I believe the living space is 1,200 square feet, allowed for secondary dwellings. Currently, it's 900 square feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
So this wouldn't qualify then as a secondary dwelling because of the size unless they whacked off part of it?
I don't know the details of the living space, but if the living space is over 900 square feet now and then later 1,200 square feet, then it would not be able to qualify as a secondary dwelling unless they got a variance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question. What are the two properties to the immediate right? Those look like 10-acre plots to me. Is that correct?
That's a 10 acre there. The next one over, I believe, was a 10 acre.
I'm sorry, I'm asking the staff. I apologize.
I'm just trying to inform
No, I
you what's out
understand.
there. I've lived there for 24 years.
The properties to the west are both 10-acre pieces.
Do you know how long they've been 10 acres?
I do not. They're currently vacant properties.
I see. Okay. I'm just wondering, well, how did they get become 10 acre at the time? Or, I mean,
So, basically, whenever you're recording a new property, we do require that you go through the proper procedures if you're splitting it, but the recorder's office isn't going to stop you. So a lot of the time, sometimes people can record new deeds, split property, but.
so like
that
the
is-
house would trigger the requirement, but just land cutting
Yeah,
it is
it
not.
may be 10 acres, but I don't know if they're
Yeah,
buildable or not.
I just was wondering because it does, it's like, we're looking at a site here and then the immediate neighbor has, there's 10 acres. And I know it's not a true neighbor because there's no buildings there, but I'm debating on what the hair splitting here is on this being 10 acres versus the exact adjacent being not the 20 acres. So I was just kind of wondering what the sizes were.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, oh, sorry. One more. I don't know if you can, I can't really tell on this, but there are those on the corner, just to the west, and then down south of that, there's, no, I'm sorry, go to the other direction, to the west of the site.
I think he's
That's
talking about
east.
near the.
At the intersection, keep going. Nope, go to the left, down.
I believe south of the
There,
shooting
right there.
range.
So you got those two lots, and if you go down, are those residential plots there? I can't see what kind of a property there is on that. Okay, and then you have up at the corner, maybe it looks like maybe that's used as a residential. I'm just trying to get a feel for there's small parcels with
Yeah, because
residences
there's
on
some
it.
strange zoning there is what,
Yeah.
yeah, what I see what you're getting at. Like, why is there cutouts, tiny cutouts in bigger plots here?
We do have an allowance for 40-acre rural preservation districts if they want to apply for a farm development right, which gives them the option of splitting off a 1 to 2.5 acre piece that contains the home and then using the rest of it as farm acreage. So that's possibly why those properties are down there. Sometimes for mortgage reasons, certain pieces are held under the same ownership, but are technically two different parcels. So I don't know the specific history, but generally the entire area is RP zoning with some industrial zoning where the gray area, the city is. And RP generally has a 40-acre minimum for any new properties.
Thank you.
Just a quick update to what Amelia said. The farm development right process would allow both resultant parcels to have a home on them. So you'd have a 2.5 acre home site and then a 37.5 acre home site. So you'd still have two homes at the end of that process. They both retain development rights as a result of that. So again, it sounds like the gentleman who testified maybe had a farm development right approval in the past, and it looks like maybe there's another home on the other piece at this point. I can't really tell what's.
Mr. Letson, does that make that legal non-conforming on that 1 or 2 acre parcel?
It's not legal non-conforming because it's actually it's in our current code and allowed. So it's an approved thing that you can do in our code. So it'd be conforming. It'd be legal.
Thank you.
But theoretically, you could build two places split, right?
You could, yeah. Wow, my mic just turned. The farm development right does give you the ability to put essentially two homes on a 40-acre piece. You'd have the smaller 2.5 acre piece, and then historically people have used the other 37.5 acres just for agriculture. But what we often see is someone has a 40-acre piece. They've got the old homestead, and then they want to give 2.5 acres to a child or brother or something, and they carve out 2.5, and they live right next door. So.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Blitman?
I'm just going to ask the staff, but I'm hoping that the applicant, when they come back from rebuttal, will talk about what kind of farming is being done on the property, what kind of agricultural use is going on with the rest of the property.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Would you like to come back forward, the applicant, and have 5 minutes for rebuttal and also to address Commissioner Blitman's question about what kind of farming will be taking place?
Okay, first of all, let's do a question, I'll address yours first. So yes, the owner, Jim, he does have horses on the property, and that's what his thing is. Of course, it's his home, so he does have chickens and things like that, but primarily it's just been keeping horses on the property.
Thank you.
What was the next one? Or I see the,
Commissioner Russell?
Hi. Did you have a neighborhood meeting, and how
Did.
many people showed up, and what was the response, besides the gentleman sitting here?
yeah, we had one lady from down the street show up, and she said she was okay. She said she was for it. She didn't really care what he did with the property. She totally understood, you know, and she said, I'm not really here for that. I'm just here to meet him, because she hadn't met Jim yet. So she just wanted to meet him and talk to him, and that was it. So, but besides that, nobody else showed up to the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Birch?
Do you know how long the existing owner has owned this property?
I believe 4 years. 4 years, I believe, yeah.
Okay. And the existing owner is currently living in the house that was built in 1978?
No, he lives in the new house that we built a couple years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, his sister lives in the older home. And the plans too for the property is for him not to, you know, sell it or anything. Like, he wants to keep both properties. So he's not going to, you know. And the other idea was behind this was, you know, if things change in the future, we don't want it to be split even more times. So that was our other research was, hey, if we split it 10, in the future when things change, we're kind of locked into this 10 for obviously quite a while, you know, beyond our time. So that was the other thing. But really the main objective or the goal is to keep both homes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Blitman?
Can you address the claim that when you built the first house, you knew that you were going to have to tear down
No.
the other house?
I was not told that. No, like I said, I own Red Leaf Building Company. I pulled out a building permit. They never said anything like that to me. So yeah, that was the only thing that we had heard was, well, his late wife, she had passed away a year ago, but Jim's wife, she had talked to them and she reached out to me and she said, the only thing that they had mentioned was we can't build another parcel unless, you know, it's back then it was 900 square feet and they changed it to 1,200 square feet. So they mentioned that, hey, you know, you might have to make sure the new home is 1,200 square feet. When I got the permit, they did not tell me that, no.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, you can go ahead and sit down unless there's anything else you would like to add.
I would like to add, I mean, like I said, I mean, he's not planning on reselling this property. He is planning on keeping both. He just doesn't want to tear down a perfectly good structure that's been there. And he did model it to where he repainted the siding, made it look nice, brought it back to life. The house looks nice, the older home. And yeah, there is two entrances to each parcel, and we got that when we built the property. And then the other thing was, the older farmhouse, we don't know the exact square footage. Like I said, it's close to, from my eyes, I think it's close to that 1,500 square feet. That is one thing, instead of denying it, my proposal would be, we can make sure it's, around that 1,200 square feet to meet that guideline if possible. But ideally, it seems to make sense to split it since all that work's already been done and it's already got two separate septics and wells.
Thank you. Commissioner Blitman, another question?
Yeah, I always have questions. Tell me again where the land, the driveway is, like how the driveway
You can see it, I
comes into
think,
the property.
on the one map. So yeah, I think this is just what the surveyor had kind of mocked up. When we built the property, so the older home on the left, when we built the property, we didn't have the road done on the right. So we were entering in that way when we built, but, so it is kind of connecting right now, of course, because he owns both properties and he drives back and forth. And so right now, the actual property line, that's how he gets back to go to his horses too. But you can see the entrance right there, I don't know, right above the size. It's like 539, or it's like pretty much right in the middle of it. Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, that's an older image, but yeah. Yeah, it's right in between parcels on Cunamora.
Thank you. Any other questions for the staff or for the applicant?
Yeah,
All right, I think you're good to go now.
all right.
So I will close the public hearing for this item and look for a motion from my commissioners, my fellow commissioners. Just as a reminder, we can either recommend approval, recommend denial, or table this to a future meeting. Commissioner Birch?
I will make a motion. Based upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law contained in the staff report, we recommend approval of project number 202-302-632-ZC-DA-OTD, subject to the conditions of approval that are attached as Exhibit A to the staff report.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Is there anything you would like to discuss with your motion, Chairman Birch?
I think it's a legitimate point that's been made that when somebody comes in and buys a piece of property, that we expect them to comply with the law as it then exists. If this were a matter of first impression and the applicant were coming forward and they had not yet built the new home, then we might see this somewhat differently. On many of occasions, we have agreed to allow residents to split their lots and to put additional homes on them. In the instant case, however, what we would be telling the applicant that they had to do if they had to tear down that existing home would probably be walk away from hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I certainly wouldn't be prepared to do that. What is happening on Cunamora Road are major changes. It is dramatically different today than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. And it's going to continue to change. And I think that this doesn't even budge the needle for what's coming to Cunamora Road. And so therefore, I think that it's a perfectly reasonable request. And again, I wouldn't ask the applicant to have to walk away from hundreds of thousands of dollars by demolishing, as the applicant said, a perfectly good home.
Thank you. Commissioner Wickstrom, did you have any comments to add?
Oh, yeah, well, it's the same thing, where it's an existing situation there right now with the two houses. And again, you hate to see a house that's been remodeled be just taken down. There's not a lot of development out there right now in those adjacent lots, so what do you do with a 10-acre out there, or 20-acre, I should say? I just don't see, it's not going to greatly affect the adjacent area. There are some houses on very small parcels out there that have been split down there. And I agree with that there's going to be a lot going on out there. There's going to be a very busy area. They're already set up. They have their own septic, own well. Everything's ready to go. And it's just, I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact on that area. And the ability for other people in that area to come before us for a zoning change. And this is, it's a one-time division right now. So it's going to be one time. And other people are going to have that same possibility to do that too as well.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes.
I'm kind of one of those people that believes strongly in fairness, and so the argument that other people have, put their applications in and have been denied, or that this person that is building, like knowingly built, knowing that they were going to have to take it down, that kind of speaks to me from a fairness perspective. But I really like Commissioner Birch's comment that if I were looking at this brand new, knowing that it's within a mile of where the Cuna city limits are, and knowing everything that I know that's going on Cuna Road, the days of that being truly rural and not having any traffic it's going to change. And I grew up in the area and I've been on that road a bunch. And so I think it's different today than it was 10 years ago, or even, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. And so I think that we have a difference. And I think if we were looking at it as a standalone before the house was built, I would be very I would feel very comfortable voting for it. And so just because the applicant did it out of order, I don't think we should penalize them because they didn't do it in the right order if the answer ends up in the same spot. And so that's my thought. I still think it's wrong to do things out of order, but if we're going to end up in the same spot, we would have gotten there anyway. I feel okay about it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion?
Mr. Chair, I did have one.
Commissioner Scott?
I agree with Commissioner Blitman that I don't like that this is an after-the-fact split because I worry that it creates a precedence that a house gets built and then come hat in hand, ask for forgiveness later. However, it's not like they're trying to subdivide it, and after we talked to staff, they said that these rules are implied. This isn't like a set in stone, you must do it. And that kind of, and Commissioner Birch's comment about, I hadn't thought of it until he said about the, if there was nothing there, we absolutely would be saying yes. This wouldn't even be an issue. So I'm fine with approving it, but it was up until that thought process of maybe it's our end of Ada County that we are the problem at this point, that we don't have, you must tear down that house or something. And it's trying to say we're just implying that needs to happen. That's not the way to go, but we can't throw that rule on top of them. So I agree with everyone who's spoken. I don't like that it was done out of order. I think there is if someone were to come to us and say, hey, we saw that hearing XYZ back in March of whatever, we're doing the same thing. It's going to be real hard for us to start saying no to this, but we have no, I guess, procedure to say no at this point, as well as I think Commissioner Birch is absolutely right when it comes to what we would do if the house wasn't there. I mean, it's almost like it's basically throwing out the baby out with the bathwater if we're saying no at this point, so.
Any other comments? All I'll add is, I do appreciate the applicant coming and, correcting the mistake that was made, in making this property in conformity. Again, this property also started out, regardless of the new property, as, a grandfathered in non-conforming parcel of land. So I do also appreciate with this rezone and the splitting, it brings both parcels into conformity, even though, yes, the zoning that it's going to is not, congruent with the surrounding parcels. But again, if you look at the parcel map on the screen right now, none of the surrounding parcels are 40 acres either, but are all currently zoned as RP, so they're all also non-conforming for buildable lots right now. So I do really appreciate kind of the cleanup aspect of this for, unincorporated Ada County. And again, I think it was probably just a miscommunication or an accident. I don't think there was any malice with building the second house and then realizing after the fact. And again, echoing Commissioner Birch, it would almost be pointless to deny them, force them to tear down this house, and then come back later to then spend a ton of money, again, not only on this application process, but also building a whole new house from scratch. When it's a perfectly good house, I don't think this will impact the area at all. But with that being said, I will look for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. And I will vote in favor as well, so the application passes. And the last thing on our agenda is the minutes from the February 15th, 2024 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Blitman.
I vote to approve the minutes on the February 15th, 2024 meeting.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All righty, and I will just, note for the record that I will not be voting on this since I was not present at the February 15th
I wasn't here
meeting.
either, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have voted either.
Okay. And then last thing on our agenda is the review of the Board of County Commissioner meeting from last night. Mr. Letson?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. A pretty brief agenda last night.
Yelling at us over there.
The first item was a time extension for the Winners Run subdivision. That it was that subdivision's last and final time extension that can be granted. They have 2 years to build what they want. Otherwise, back to the drawing board. So
There's a
that time,
massive community outcry against it. This point.
yeah, the applicant talked about retooling the project based on neighborhood concerns. It sounds like it's likely going to be a much different project, what we receive moving forward, but we'll wait and see what that application looks like. There was a preliminary plat for a 2-lot subdivision. This was on the corner of Vista Avenue and Cuna Mora Road. You recommended approval, and the board opted to approve that as well. That was splitting 80 acres into 2 40-acre pieces. There was a variance for an existing accessory structure that's located inside the 25-foot required setback. The board opted to table that based on some conversation between the applicant and the neighbor to the south regarding an existing property line and fence that had been constructed and possibly relocating that. So the board has tabled that to review legal matters associated with that issue, and they'll make a final decision at an open business meeting here in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, the zoning code amendment that you recommended approval of recently for the increased size of secondary dwellings, solar panels, temporary offices, and a misdemeanor for violating the zoning code. You recommended approval, and that was recommended approval by the board as well. And so with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr.
When is
Wilson?
the accessory dwelling unit increase effective?
As soon as we get the ordinance published. So we've sent that out to get published this morning. It's usually 3 or 4 days
Okay.
to get that done.
So pretty
So
soon.
that will be the new code, and we'll have a lot, we'll have larger secondary dwellings in the county, I guess. So
What's the size of the plot that you got to have for that, or like the minimum size for something that,
yeah,
like someone coming with like their quarter-acre yard and saying, I want to can they do that with like a 1,200? a second?
we have and forgive me for not having that exact thing memorized in our code right now. We do have 2 different types of secondary dwellings. We have detached, which is the majority of what you see here. Someone's putting it inside of their shop building or above their garage. And then we have something called an attached secondary dwelling, where it's attached to the existing main home. In those smaller lot zones, we allow attached secondary dwellings, but not detached secondary dwellings. And then there is a maximum lot coverage and also a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet to even have a secondary dwelling, period. So there are some of those thresholds that kind of check, particularly the development of secondary dwellings on smaller lots, so. All right.
Other questions?
So the second item we heard tonight, the zoning, does that go to the board?
The last item that you just finished? Yeah, yours was a recommendation, so that will go to our Board of Commissioners, and they'll make the final
And
decision.
then the social hall, is that a recommendation as well?
Nope, your final decision on that. Yep,
Unless it's appealed, which I
yeah,
don't think it's.
right.
All right, well, I guess without anything else, yes.
Could you call for a vote on the minutes from the January
Oh.
meeting as well? Because we didn't
Yes.
have quorum to. That's true.
That's right. Can we have a motion to approve the January 11th meetings or minutes?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the January 11th minutes.
All righty, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Okay.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, and all opposed?
So it sounds like
Okay.
Wickstrom abstained. who
Wickstrom and
else abstained?
Blitman.
Thank you, okay. Blitman and Wickstrom abstained, okay. All right, well, great job running your first
Thank you.
meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Do
you
I
guys
need to,
beat
like-
the board, so good job. You got them by 6 minutes.
That's all I'm
so.
here for, is to beat the board.
Do I need to say officially that we're recessed?
Just say you're adjourned, yeah.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Yeah, there you go.